Good morning.
Good morning.
Call your mother. This Sunday is Mother's Day. Everyone on this campus has one thing in common. We all have a woman who has given us life. Without her giving birth to you, you wouldn't even be here. Without her, none of us would have the privilege of knowing you. Although I have not personally experienced labor pains, I know that it takes much more than just giving birth to be a mom. This Sunday is not a day to only celebrate your biological mother. Some of you never knew the woman who gave you life. Some of you have lost your mother before she could see the young man you've become. Some of you were raised by someone other than your mom. Some of you have stepmothers that support you just as much, if not, in some cases, more than your biological mother does. Some of you have grandmothers and aunts who would sacrifice the world for you. It may seem strange that I am one of the few women on this campus that is not actually a mother, and I am giving a chapel talk about being a mother. I fall into the aunt who would sacrifice the world for you category. I am known to many as crazy Aunt Kirsten, and I'm crazy about my kids. From the time I was a little girl, I always knew that I wanted to be a mother. I started babysitting when I was 11, and I couldn't get enough of the adorable children that were entrusted in my care. I had no idea what kind of career I would have, but I knew I would be a mom. At some point, though, probably in my mid-20s, the idea of being a mother suddenly terrified me. I had no doubt that I could handle babies and toddlers, but for some reason, the thought of eventually being the mother of a teenager scared me to death. I knew I would never be able to handle the worry that comes with being the mother of a child that was out of my sight. And the first thing teenagers usually want is to be out of the sight of their parents. I can't even imagine the worry your mothers must have when some of you are hundreds or thousands of miles out of their sight for the 8 months that you spend a year on this hilltop. If you've been involved in the play, been tutored by me, or served a Sunday detention in the theater, you've probably met my mother. She's the one person I can count on to drop everything and come help me when I have no one else. Moms need to be needed. And although we don't always like to admit it, they really give the best advice. They want what is best for their children. And a mom's greatest wish is that her children are happy. There are times when she may feel like a nag or she just doesn't get it, but she probably knows you better than anyone else, and she's always on your side. Since I wasn't sure whether I'd become a mother, I chose a career that would allow me to make a difference in the lives of children, even if they weren't my own. One of the greatest pieces of advice my mother gave me was in my first year of teaching. There was one particular boy in my 4th grade classroom who was a bit challenging for me. He never sat still, he constantly blurted out in class, and he had an annoying way of steering me away from my lesson plans for the day. The hours I spent trying to squelch his antics in my classroom far exceeded the hours I spent focusing on the well-behaved children. He was a distraction. He drove me nuts. And I did not know how I was going to make it through the school year without losing my mind. I loved all of my students, except this one boy. My mom had been a teacher for 40 years, so I called her to commiserate about notorious Nico. I figured she would give me some ideas on how to best discipline this rambunctious 10-year-old who was making me question why I had decided to devote my life to teaching other people's children. What my mother said on the phone changed my whole outlook on Nico. She listened to my complaints and acknowledged my frustration, but she reminded me of something. Just remember that he is somebody's child. The next day, I looked at Nico with a mother's eyes. It didn't take long for me to appreciate all of the qualities he had that had nearly driven me insane a few minutes before. Nico became one of my favorite students, and I still stay in contact with him today. My mother's wise words have rung in my head every time I meet a new student, especially the challenging ones. Call your mother. Call your grandmother. Call your aunt. Call the people in your life who support you. It doesn't have to be a long call. They just need a little reassurance that their child is safe. I know there are times when it may feel like a burden to some of you, but all they want is to hear your voice and know that you're okay. I know your schedules are busy, FaceTime and texting count too. Just don't forget that although many of you tower over them with your physical stature now, you're all still their babies, and they love you. The years of parenting teenagers involve many more sleepless nights than the months of parenting a newborn baby. Over the years, I have been criticized for caring too much about my students. I've been told that I'm too invested in their lives. They have their own parents to take care of them. But when your parents sent you to Salisbury, they entrusted us with your care. If I sent my child hundreds or thousands of miles away from home, I would hope that they had a few teachers who cared too much. If you were ever in the vicinity of my office during breaks or X-Block, you know that I cherish the time I get to know my boys as people, not just as students. I admit that I definitely do care too much, but that's just who I am, and I have no intention of changing. When I call my mother now, which is not as often as it should be, the first question she always asks is, "How are your boys?" I get to watch your games and attend your music concerts. I get to hear your announcements at school meetings and help you with your homework. I get to see your smiling faces every day, and I get to be a shoulder to cry on when you're having a tough time. I get to give you high fives when you've done something amazing. I get to be your sounding board when you're faced with difficult decisions. I get to hear your Salisbury brothers chant your name as you score a goal, make a basket, or finally get put into a game. Your mothers would be here doing the same thing if they could. And many who have lived close enough do. Although I thought I would be able to avoid it by not having teenagers of my own, I also get to worry. It comes with the territory. I would like to thank all of your mothers, stepmothers, grandmothers, crazy aunts, and special women in your life for sharing their sons with us. Call your mother. Reassure her that you're okay.